Hello, and welcome to the monthly Think Big for the package group. And today we actually have two guest stars appearing to talk through some potential integrations with security features. And we have a full agenda. So let's see, what's the first item is, Ethan and Dennis, you both mentioned the idea, or you conducted a POV of Package Hunter and proposed integrating the functionality into the product, at least for NPM. I was wondering if you could give us an overview of the POV that you've done and maybe some of the opportunity there for integration.
Sure. Let me maybe start by introducing what Package Hunter is doing. Package Hunter is somewhat related to one feature on your roadmap that is called dependency firewall. And the idea here is that we test the dependencies that we are using in our projects internally a little bit to see if they are doing any unexpected functionality. More precisely, what it's doing is it's installing all our NPM dependencies that we are using in the GitLab Rails application. And it's monitoring the system calls that are done during the installation. So it would notice, for example, something like the dependency confusion thing that went through social media 2 weeks ago or something like that, where some researcher just found that he could claim packages and just have a little install script in them that calls back to the server. Something like this would trigger an alert in Package Hunter. So potentially that would be a nice addition to our package offering, where we could say, okay, when a package is added to our registry, we kind of do a behavioral monitoring of the package, and then we let the maintainer of the registry know, hey, this package that you just added does an outgoing call as soon as you install it. Maybe you want to check that's expected. We already use this on the GitLab Rails app. You can see the results in the security dashboard. So curious what your thoughts are.
I was just going to add a little bit that this is different from dependency scanning itself, because it helps identify unknown malicious packages as opposed to identify if you're using a known malicious package already. And then I was just going to add, along with uploading packages, it could potentially be used as part of a package proxy or something like that. So if someone's using GitLab to download all their packages, as it's pulling from somewhere else, we might be able to aggregate that pull and, let them know that, hey, this thing you're pulling from somewhere else, through the proxy is potentially malicious as well. So, I wonder, Dennis, can you speak a little bit about how it works today? Because one of the questions that we have is, as a POV, it isn't necessarily in a format that's performant or, just ready to put in the product right away. And so part of the discussion we're having is what work would need to be done in order for it to be useful to you all, So we can start by talking about a little bit about how it works, and then, get initial feedback.
Sure. Yeah, right now it's pretty much a prototype that was made on purpose for internal usage. If we actually want to make that part of the product, then we can use the same concepts and ideas, but maybe we need to re-implement it. So very likely we need to re-implement it. Right now how it works is it's set up as an CI job. So whenever, for example, there's a change to any of the dependency manifests, the log files, yarn.log, it is sending out all the sources of the project to an external server, and on that server, a Package Hunter is running package hunter is using Falco to monitor the behavior of the project during installation, and then whatever caused an alert during the installation then would be sent back to the CI job, and from the CI job then it's landing in the security dashboard. To give you an example how the current workflow looks a little bit, I posted an example alert in the agenda. Yeah. So I guess if we want to implement that in the package registry, we wouldn't call out to an external server, but would do this analysis somewhere in the Rails app. I don't know. I guess that's where your expertise comes in.
Just want to call out that I'm really excited that we're talking about security scanning and that kind of work when it comes to package, especially going in both directions. So looking at, this isn't on a list of things we know is bad, but it's acting in a way that we don't think is good. And it certainly aligns with what our larger customers are asking for, which is we want all of the data that GitLab can give us about how safe and secure this package is. So it really aligns with what our users are looking for.
And it supports, I think in our original conversation, we mentioned supporting it for Node. It does support other formats as well. It's just that's the one that we could implement maybe easiest.
Right now it's Node, right? But the monitoring works on the process basis. So you could apply the same concept to other programming languages as well. The thing that you probably have to customize for each language are the rules files. So Falco, I'm not aware if you're aware of Falco. Falco is also part of GitLab, but in the defend section. And basically, it's monitoring processes, or the system calls that processes do, and the user can define certain rules of what behavior should create an alert. And right now, the most custom thing to Node.js are these rules. So, for example, I whitelisted the registry from which we now pull the dependencies in, because this is expected, right? When you do an npm install, it needs to pull dependencies from the registry. So this is an okay network connection. But if it does any other network connection to some unknown server, that would not be okay. So likewise for Ruby, for example, we would need to whitelist Ruby gems.
But like to actually do it, we could support, didn't Jörn do an example with Ruby already? Like it isn't too hard to add support for like installing Ruby gems, you know,
Yeah.
like it wouldn't be difficult to add new languages. It would just there would be a process of tuning it for those languages as well, along with, you know, the basic logic to add additional.
And there's still value in it, even if we're only talking about private packages that are hosted on GitLab, because those private packages could pull in dependencies from other projects across the web. So it would be good to monitor those things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Each of these transitive packages can also run arbitrary code at installation time. So exactly that's the idea.
Do you think that people are changing their behavior based on the recent dependency confusion attacks? Have you seen any customers or are things starting to change in the industry in the way people pull packages?
I think that there have been a couple of blog posts and so on how to prevent this dependency confusion issue. So I guess there's some awareness around the topic. Yeah, but mostly it's about tips how to configure your NPM client. not run into this issue.
And I know I'm asking a lot of questions. You mentioned that in the proof of concept that it ended up in the security dashboard, any known vulnerabilities, but I'm assuming that there's no concerns about having that in the package registry user interface as well, right? Maybe have it bubble up in both places.
That would be interesting to see some UI designs. Yeah, I haven't worked myself yet much with our package registry, since internally we are using the public registries. But okay. Yeah, maybe it's not an issue. I guess it makes sense if we host the packages themselves. Then the security dashboard right now has the information of CI pipelines, but when we host the packages in our own registry, then there are no CI pipelines necessarily, right?
I'm not sure. Can you repeat that question? So if we host the packages in our own registry, would they still get built with CI?
Yeah, that's actually, it's also half of a question for you. So right now, what I can say is that in the security dashboard, the alerts that are displayed there are coming from the pipeline, from CI pipelines. But I'm not sure what the flow would be if we add packages to our GitLab-based registry and we want to do this kind of scanning. Would this also happen in CI pipelines, or is this unrelated from CI pipelines?
Yeah, I think what he's saying is, like, when you push the package, there would have to kick off some process to actually do the analysis. So would that be, how would we do that? Through a pipeline, or would there,
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, like users can push packages manually, but they can also build packages and publish them through a CI job. And so I think, like, the idea that I'm thinking of is that if a user builds a package through CI, it would be neat if they had like the optional job to kick off of, go ahead and scan all of the dependencies of the package I just built. And then in the package UI, once we see the new package that was built, we can see any vulnerabilities that may have shown with it.
Would it make sense to add a status to the package, like a security status, and say every time a new package appears in a UI, it's untested, and then periodically go and check and move all the untested to verified, or even have like policies that you may want to scan them, I don't know, once a week, because the dependency of the dependency can change and invalidate the status, right?
Right, yeah. That's a good point. In the context of the project where we have a log file, we don't have this issue, but in the without log file, yeah, right, transitive dependencies can change and then you might have to rescan.
How are these issues typically resolved? So let's say you find an issue, Package Hunter finds an issue. What happens next? Are we expecting that someone that's a project member is going to go in and manually resolve it? Or does it come with any like recommendations or things like that?
Yeah, you need to investigate a little bit. Like this example that I posted in the agenda walks you through an example where an unexpected network connection is triaged, and so the alert that is in the security dashboard gives you some idea where to look into, but you still need to dig a little bit to find that code that caused the network connection.
And I mean, you could probably to build it out, you could probably do some stuff where you, like, specifically for a network connection, we could build out some metadata around it, like look up some information about the IP, where it is, who it's registered to, that sort of thing, to help someone make that decision. But since, you know, we're dealing with unknown behavior, it would be difficult to like, you know, be 100% that saying this is definitely malicious.
We were like you mentioned earlier on in the call, we were talking about building this ourselves as part of the dependency firewall and coming up with a set of rules. But it sounds like maybe Package Hunter could be an accelerator on that. We don't have to build everything ourselves, and then we would just have to, when we add a new format, update the like a rules file basically. That's pretty awesome. That would be a nice bonus for us to not have to build out all of that logic.
Yeah, I guess you can start with the rules file that I have there if you want to use Falco. What also would be interesting to look into is if we can use our own Falco that already can be is integrated with the defense section to do this kind of analysis instead of calling out to an external server like I'm doing right now. Could we somehow use Falco to do this inside of GitLab Runner?
That I'm not sure of. I guess we'd have to investigate that. I'm wondering if David looks like he's gearing up to ask a series of questions, and I can't tell, and I keep feeling like I'm cutting him off. So, David, did you have a question that you're preparing?
Yeah, I think it's quite clear that we will need some kind of background process for this, because as Steve said, users can manually push a package to the GitLab registry. Also, we could use that background process when we have GitLab as a proxy right between the client, which could be NPM or whatever, and the official registry. They could be used there too. So I guess it's quite clear that we will need a background process. But at the same time, it's perhaps better to have it as a job if the package is built in a CI pipeline. So I guess we will need both implementations.
So would like a potential MVC be the pipeline job, since we basically can do a pipeline now, right? And then it would just be, you know, having a pipeline template, or, you know, some way that it presents this to someone and then ingesting the results into package and you know, incorporating it into the UI.
Yeah, I can see an MVC where we have that CI set up, and then we can incorporate it into the pipeline. And then within the UI, if someone manually pushes a package, maybe there's a button to kick off the job next to the package. So, you know, prior to adding the background jobs, there's just a way for users to manually start that job for packages that weren't built with pipelines. That could be a potential way to look at it.
Sorry, is this this is based on the premise that we build it internally into GitLab, yeah?
I don't know.
Like in general, the conversation here is we're not going to be shipping code that our customers upload to some external service, right? So I think Dennis or Ethan mentioned earlier that we'd have to build it internally into the Rails app, right?
Yeah, we would, one of the challenges we would have is how to, that because it's basically a special runner that does this, you know, you have to have Falco running on a runner. So it would be, how do we make that available as well? Because right now it is for us just a system that, you know, a system that lives in one of our, you know, one of our cloud environments that it talks to. So we'd have to explore how to offer that and allow customers to set it up and stuff.
So I feel like there's a couple of like first steps here. One would be figuring out to add hooks, but I think that's like one scenario where someone uploads a package directly. rather than building one. So we could just go down the path initially for an MVC to go for built packages so that we have the trigger point already built in, so we don't have to go and add that. The other thing we still have to do is figure out how we're going to create this as an internal service. Because if we still have to do that, then there's a whole bunch of other heavy lifting we need to do around infrastructure and whatnot to make sure that we've got this service, unless it's like just an integrated process that we've built into the Rails app, right?
Mm-hmm. The challenge is having Falco available, and that's sort of what Dennis was trying to get to, is like, can we piggyback on some of the work that Defend is doing with Falco already, to enable this, so that we're not coming up with a whole new solution.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And thanks for reminding me that Dennis said that. Sorry, Dennis. But yeah, I feel like that's the two things we need to figure out, whether Defend, and thank you again, whether Defend's got something sort of in flow that we could look at using rather than building it, like implementing another version, or if that's necessary. And I think once we are able to work that out, we'd actually be able to move forward pretty quick with NPM, at least, which is clearly a concern. And to be clear with everyone, our ops has been looking at at risk areas, and this type of scenario security, problem of I can't word today, sorry. But this type of scenario is on the list of really high potential risk areas for the stage, for the sub-department. So we definitely want to invest. I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to shut anything down. I'm not. I'm like, okay, next steps, what do we do? Right. So it feels like we already have hooks for pre-built, for internally built. If we do uploads, figure out if there's a hook there. I know there's a hook there because we're obviously logging things. So there must be a way to hook into that. If we need to build a background process. We already know how to do that, so it doesn't feel like a heavy lift either. But working out whether we have an already implemented version probably feels like the next step. Who's best to do that, you reckon, Tim?
On our team, you're saying? Like who's?
Well, I mean, I think we just need to reach out to Defend to see if they've already got something that we can work with or not.
Oh yeah, well I could do that, and Ian and I were talking recently with the secure team about bringing together the container scanning and the container registry. So I think, and that has a similar dependency. I see him pasting the issue there, and that is a similar dependency that a CI job has to run. And so there would need to be a background process. So I feel like there's a couple of things that we could bring together working on this. So I'd be happy to help bring in some of the Defend folks to see what we could do.
Yeah, I think if we can, maybe if we have an issue that we want to write up to start figuring out what we're doing or how we want to move forward with this idea, because I think this is an awesome idea. I don't know if my tone reflects that, but I think this is great. Thank you very much. And to just figure out what gaps we have there, write it down, and then we can start, ask the peeps on Defend whether how far in they are with that, whether that's where they're going or not, because that'd be really cool.
If you want to include me in that, Tim, just, as a subject matter expert on what we have so far, I'm happy to participate as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan.
Yeah,
and thanks, Dennis,
for me.
as well. What was that, Dennis? I cut you off. I apologize.
I just said same as Ethan too, if you want to include me in the discussion with Defend.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Is there anything else we should talk about on this topic?
I just want to call out from the UX side that if we can get all of the Defend and all of the metric, that kind of gathering to be consistent so that there is a button that triggers a CI job, if that's the way we do it, that will help our users know that security is happening the same way every time, and it makes them more likely to trust the data we're presenting, especially when it comes to dependencies and security of those dependencies. We want to be crystal clear the whole time. So it's good to keep that in mind as we get started.
Okay, we can move on to the next topic. I thought it was possible that Seth might have been able to join. I know he was a maybe, but we were talking recently about as we consider dog fooding the package registry, which we are talking about for Node and for Ruby. Should GitLab still use public registries, or should we move all of GitLab's packages to be hosted in GitLab? And then I linked to an issue for discussion, and it's kind of similar to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. So I'm just wondering if anyone has any opinions on that.
I do. I think it's a good idea. You know, the more you know, from security, you know, we from a security perspective, having control of the packages that we're using all the time is a great idea, you know. So like if we have something there and we know we're using that, that's already a win for us, because you can validate that one package and get a pretty good idea of what it is. Whereas if you're always pulling from public, then like, you know, you essentially have to verify it every time. There's some things in place, but you know, you have to be, yeah.
So I wanted to join the conversation here. I think before we are able to move this stuff internally, we need to have a really clear workflow on how we handle updates and dependency update. At least the front end, we are doing weekly updates of packages, and we need to be able to keep the rhythm to address bug fix and new feature and this kind of things. So I think a workflow is a mandatory step to have things moved to our internal registry. Our workflow is to say this external package is now promoted to our internal and now it's safe to use.
Seth had recorded a comment here. I don't know if you want to read that, or Tim, you wanted to respond first.
I was just, yeah, okay, I can read Seth's comment. A lot of interesting supply chain security issues are coming up with regards to packages, typo squatting, and dependency confusion are just two of the problems I've seen.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you wanted to respond. I did write a comment, but you know, we were live chatting, so I'm happy for you to respond if you wanted to have comments there, Tim.
No, I was just typing Nico's comments as he was.
Sweet. Yeah, so we've been talking for a while about the idea of doing sort of like a dependency sort of cache proxy type scenario where we're, you know, setting up an order of operations for customers to be able to say, you know, if it's not in my local, then pull it from somewhere else, then pull it from somewhere else. Like, does this idea contradict that, in that we're going to then say, no, we should be moving everything internally? And how does this affect HA as well with like high level build priorities? You know, because if it's all local and there's some issue, which does happen, we hope to avoid it, but it does happen. You know, what do we do about that?
Yeah, I do think that's a good point about the dependency proxy and caching concept. I shared in Slack that white paper from Microsoft of them basically saying that you should host all of your packages locally and not pull them, or if you pull them from a public registry, pull them to a local place and then use them from there when you could check them. So that's kind of against the idea of creating the virtual registry or using the dependency proxy, like you said. I think it's something that we should consider and validate. It certainly seems like customers still want that capability. I haven't heard anyone say I'm going away from that, but I think we did recently delay that work for a variety of reasons, but I think it'll be good to sort of validate that people still do want to approach the virtual registries like that.
I think the idea is still valuable, especially if you think it as a middleman step that you can configure. So it can also be used as a security layer, right? So everything gets pulled in the cache, and once in the cache, you can validate it and move it to more permanent registry. And then you are able to turn off pulling out from external registry. I think it could help a lot in keeping things in sync and validated at the same time.
Good point, Nico. Yeah, good point, Dan. Too. I think we will need to validate this, but as far I haven't heard anyone come back. People are still expressing interest every day in that feature. So I don't want to say that we shouldn't do it, but
yeah, I think maybe the approach is a little different. We're basically saying we're going to mirror whatever dependency library people are using instead of saying we're just going to pass through or whatever, right? Which means there's storage implications. Then we need to make sure that we're the ones we have a record with. Basically, we're the single source of truth for whatever packages are available if this is the type of thing we want to do. And maybe they're not mutually exclusive, so that you could have an option to turn that on. But I think, for customers that are interested in saying, well, if you can't get it locally, get it from here, get it from here, get it from here, that would mean just pulling it in locally, scanning and doing all that sort of stuff, and then sending it on. Yeah, I'll stop talking now.
anything else to add to that topic, anyone? No. Okay, Dan, you have the next agenda item.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, so we had a recent incident in production, well documented. Thank you very much for that. Definitely need to start thinking more carefully about how we're focusing on quality in our code. A couple of issues I've shared around that, but I'm looking for thoughts, feedback, and sort of suggested action to take here to improve our quality a little bit. I know we can't avoid being human. It's one of those things that just happens. So no one's expected to be perfect here, because I'm certainly not. But let's sort of think about ways that we could start improving how we can get coverage, end-to-end tests, what testing is important, and also evaluating risk. And I actually have a document I'm going to share. David, you had a thought?
No, I only had the the comment I posted. So we have a discussion after that incident, and yeah, it would be interesting to have possible answers to the questions in those discussions. One of the aspects is that sometimes things can get deployed really, really quickly before even you can test them in production. And so I'm really interested if we can do anything about it, because it's not an ideal situation where your merge request is merged at the end of your workday, and when you start the next day, it's already on production. And that feels wrong.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a certain category of usage patterns that you can't predict, and I think that's kind of expected. And then when something goes out quickly, maybe you don't have a chance. But I wonder, I also wonder whether we need to sort of look at maybe evaluating risk in that area and determining whether we hold up, merging into production to evaluating canary or something like that before it goes out, or feature flag it differently, or, look at some way of providing ourselves the ability to actually test it. Again, I think there's always going to be not always, but particularly with new functionality, there's always going to be that I'm not sure how our customers are going to go and use this. We don't have all of the test cases, but the other issue I was looking for was the suggestion I made around scanning logs and doing an analysis of actual request patterns and sort of seeing if we can determine that we're covering, common case usage patterns from our customers. That's still lagging though. It doesn't solve the problem of hey, everything's perfect when it goes into production. That's not the problem that's being solved there. That's kind of evaluating after the fact. So I think maybe take a look at the risk analysis rubric, have a think about that as well. See if that sort of aligns with how we're considering the risk of the code we're emerging in production and how that can impact our customers. Consider, and I'm sort of relying on you all at some level, at a lot of levels really, but consider how you might evaluate the code you're writing, but also like how could we test this in a way that doesn't require an individual to, like figure out how everything's going to work. And that's our only method of preventing issues. Because we're all, as I said, we're all human. We're not going to get everything right, and that's okay. Let me see if I can find that issue.
Sure, I put it in the chat in the agenda. From a priority perspective, do people feel like are moving forward, like we're scheduling time to allot for this work? Because I know it can be, it's another type of engineering project to add these tasks and to think about them and where they go and stuff like that. So I just want to make sure that you do feel that way, and that I'm making room and space for that too, from a future planning perspective. Mixed results.
That's a big maybe.
It's a big maybe. Well, I do think that this would be something that we could allot more time for in our planning issues, and I'm definitely happy to do that, because the customer incidents are a big drain on our customers and of course on us. No one likes to have to deal with those. So I do want to make sure that we allot enough time.
Go on.
So thinking about code coverage, right now, at least for container registry, at least for Go projects, you'll get a report that's just like, hey, like coverage went up this much or went down this much across all the pipelines. But one of the things you can do with Go is you can say like, and I'm sure like other projects have this, where you just like highlight line by line, like what lines are actually covered by the test and what lines are not. And I'm wondering if highlighting those in an MR review would be worthwhile. I know coverage is not perfect metric, but it might be nice to have that in the reviewer's face, like, oh, like this line isn't covered by a test, like maybe I should ask why or pay particular attention to this case. I'm wondering if that's something that might direct people's attention appropriately.
I think we had a feature that has been turned on for a while on .com, and I think is now off, that was showing the coverage on the reviewer interface. I definitely saw it live. Maybe we can see if we can enable this for the container registry specifically. So you will get a green line. It's not on now, but it was definitely for a while. And I remember it was demoed on our front-end call. So maybe we can investigate this, because it's something that we have already.
The testing team, I know, is working on some really cool stuff. I'm just looking for the direction page that I'll share here. I got it, Ian. I can type that. Thank you. Yeah, so I know the testing team is working on some pretty cool things around code quality, test coverage. So I think what I'm looking for is like, let's consider things like automated testing, which is where I was proposing, log analysis and distribution analysis for request patterns and those sorts of things, because we can potentially generate fixtures that we can use to evaluate rather than try and sort of manually come up with everything. And other ways to evaluate automated testing that I'm sort of thinking more in terms of multiplier factor. Bye, Ethan. Yeah, so that's kind of where my head's at, of like I'm looking for ideas. And I think, Haley, if you are thinking in terms of what's available in the container registry project, I think you have a little bit more flexibility in how you evaluate within that project. I mean, and this conversation applies equally to all of the projects that we're writing code in regularly. It's not just, you know, the Rails app or container registry independently. It's for all of the things. You know, the area we're in is pretty high, sort of considered tier 0-ish, tier 1 to 0-ish operationally, and is really critical to the business. So, you know, outages that we have, as everyone notices, get a lot of attention, not only internally, but also from, you know, important customers. So I think it's very important that, because the impact on the organization is significant where we have issues. So I think what I'd like to do here is sort of, I don't know the best format, probably an issue somewhere, but I was really hoping to start a conversation, at least get you all thinking about how we could look at generating automated testing that doesn't rely on us writing, you know, heaps of lines of code of testing, and see if there's a way we can improve in this area. I'm getting that everyone may not have ideas, but that's kind of what I'd like to start thinking about.
I have a question around this. Is there some expertise that can be trained, somebody that's specialized on trying to identify, or like another set of eyes that we can put on a risky situation, a risky piece of code? So, and why I'm thinking of this is that I know that there are some engineers that as soon as I assign them on MR, the first thing that they look is the complexity of my requests. That's the first thing that they say. So somebody with this focus, that could be, I don't know, a risky code domain expert, now I'm inventing the name, or a figure like that. On the other side of automated testing, this is not to remove automated testing, but more on the procedure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. If there are certain people that you feel like are better able to, you know, offer feedback on areas of concern for quality and code complexity, that's good. And maybe we should be looking at how we train everyone up to evaluate code that way and provide that type of feedback as being the path forward. I mean, because I don't want the idea of having yet another separate crew of people that are all expected to do an extra round of reviews feels like it's a little bit narrow. But I think that's a good point. Like, maybe sort of evaluate what that feedback looks like and embody that ourselves. Unless I don't have any other suggestions though. So
I feel like that seems like the kind of thing that like the domain expert type reviewer should be able to point out. Like, if I'm familiar with package code, I should be able to say, hey, this MR changes some things that might be a high risk. So it could just be a matter of training to include that in that aspect of the review.
Yeah, I'm wondering, along with an MR, if it's, you know, if we could take this code risk awareness and just, you know, have it in the MR and like go through and say, like, check the boxes, just so that, you know, you have a checklist for yourself and you have something for the reviewer, so they're aware of sort of the risk qualities of the change you're making.
I was going to say from my part, you know, I could do some more like feature assurance testing. Like, once it's on staging, I try to do this now for like when there's direction items, I'll try and create like a little demo video, but we could put a wait and say, okay, until this feature is more risky, let's make sure that that the PM goes through and does some feature testing before we release it. Although that does feel like a break on things. I don't know if people think that would be helpful.
yeah, I mean, that might be helpful, but then everything ends up going through you at that point, Tim. So that's a lot of load on you as well. So I think maybe what we could do here is evaluate the risk analysis rubric, that the document I shared above in the issue. let's have everyone check in with evaluating that risk analysis and sort of see if it aligns. And then maybe we need to start looking and using that regularly as we start doing code reviews and as we're writing code, because ideally this happens further to the left, not when it's like about to be merged in production. It should happen as we're writing code and then first review, right? We should do this analysis and determine whether we feel this is high risk. And if it is high risk, we really should be holding ourselves to the highest bar possible, even if it slows us down a little bit in terms of delivery, because the impact of having issues, quality concerns in the code that gets merged in production is pretty high. So does that feel like a reasonable ask for everyone to evaluate that? And we can come back, maybe the sync meeting, if everyone can just confirm that they've had a look at it and just let me know if there's anything we'd like to adjust, if this doesn't feel like it aligns, and what else we might change about that. From my perspective, that document's a pretty standard risk analysis rubric. It's not particular to any team. So if we have other things we want to add, or we don't feel like some of it matches what our risks are, then does that feel good to everyone? Thumbs up is fine and we can move on. Are you going to review it too, Dennis? I mean, just kidding. Cool. I think we're over time now anyway. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, we had one more item left. I think 2 minutes is probably not enough to cover it, so we can move it to the next meeting. So I think we can close unless anyone has anything else to add. Well, thanks, Dennis and Ethan, for joining. That was a great conversation, and look forward to moving those issues forward over the next several milestones. Thanks again. And thanks, Package Group, for your attention and focus and participation in this helpful meeting. Thank you. Bye, everyone.